Another light bye week is ahead of us, but it certainly comes at a good time for those of us with 49ers options on our teams because we can stop looking at their injury report for a few days. Today, we are continuing our Moves to Make series, 5 actions we need to look into prior to Week 9's kickoff. But before we dig in, head over to 4for4.com, use promo code YouTube to get yourself 25% off any subscription plan. Add Cedric Tillman. Thought of as more of a deep league ad following his Week 7 breakout, Tillman jumped into the radar for 10 or 12 team leagues after another fantastic performance in Week 8. A whopping 26% of the Browns' pass attempts went to the sophomore's direction after Deshaun Watson went down 2 weeks ago, and with a full week of game planning around Jameis Winston, he gobbled up 24.3% target share in Week 8. He turned his 9 targets into 7 receptions and 99 yards, including a 22-yard score and a 38-yard touchdown that would inevitably win the game for the now 2-6 Browns. It was a huge divisional win that could see Cleveland fight toward a playoff berth, but more importantly, for our purposes, it should mark the coming out party for a fantasy piece that had barely produced in his first year and a half in the league. This 2-game explosion comes as a surprise to most of us, but maybe not all of us. Tillman came out of the University of Tennessee as Dane Brugler's number 8 prospect in the 2023 NFL Draft and had notched the first 1,000-yard season for the program since 2012. Brugler was concerned about his limited route tree, an opinion that was mirrored by Reception Perception's Matt Harmon. Per Harmon, quote, he figures to play the same role, as in a mostly X-receiver, in the NFL given his size and skill set, although I could see him being used inside in some situations to get him into favorable looks. He continues, quote, if he further evolves, we could see him inch closer to the T. Higgins vector of the vertical X-receiver axis. My favorite comparable for Tillman is Broncos receiver Courtland Sutton, end quote. With Amari Cooper now out of the way, Tillman can try his hand as the number 1 target earner on an offense that now looks like it will take to the air with more efficiency. And to call back to his ability from the inside when called upon, 3 of his 15 catches over these last 2 weeks have come from the slot, where he's earned 51 yards in 1 of those 2 touchdowns. Sell Michael Pittman for pennies. It's been a roller coaster ride for nearly all of the Colts receivers this year, but Michael Pittman has been stuck at the bottom of the hill while the team works on repairs. Though we could take solace in Indianapolis possibly turning back to Joe Flacco after Anthony Richardson seemed to leave the game due to being tired last week, it's hard to say that will suddenly push Pittman back into the wide receiver 2 conversation. If anything, it might be a reason to dangle him out for a wide receiver needy team. The fact is, the presumed wide receiver 1 has not played very well this season, including some pretty disastrous film from Week 8. Pittman was seen wandering into other receivers' target windows while basically walking his route and was getting bullied by a rookie cornerback on more than one occasion. En route to turning his 6 targets into 1 catch for 16 yards, came up empty on 2 contested catch opportunities, which lowers his rate in those scenarios to 46.7%, ranking 57th among the league's wide receivers. After the 2.1 half PPR point outing, Pittman now sits as fantasy's wide receiver 53 with 7.7 points per game, behind notable names such as Jalen Tolbert, Quinn Johnston, and teammate Alec Pierce, who hasn't scored more than 2.5 points since Week 5. If the veteran's target share declines at all, or if the Colts decide to start getting rookie Adonai Mitchell on the field more often, it's going to be hard to qualify Pittman anything higher than a wide receiver 4 in fantasy. With a good matchup against the Vikings coming up on the docket, it might be the best time to convince a league mate to take him off your hands. Buy Brian Robinson. Due to a knee injury that kept him completely out of Week 6 and was sandwiched by a couple of games in which he ceded more work than usual to the rest of the backfield, most of Brian Robinson's fantasy goodness has come from touchdowns as of late. This has enabled Austin Eckler to see the field a little more often, while Jeremy McNichols has seen heightened usage for the first time, basically, in his entire career. Things should be returning back to normal, though, as Robinson saw over 45% of the team's snaps for the first time since Week 4, while also handling 50% of the team's rushes and catching a pass for the first time in a month. There could have been room for a little bit more last week, but the Commanders entered the game with a hobbled Jaden Daniels against the Bears defense that has looked very impressive this season. Expect Washington to score some touchdowns that don't involve Hail Marys moving forward, with Robinson being the main beneficiary. This should lock him into very strong RB2 territory, so if you can finagle him from a manager who needs some depth to the wide receiver room, go for it. Drop Tyler Lockett. The first and possibly only week without DK Metcalf didn't go quite as planned for the receiving options behind the wide receiver one. While Jackson Smith and Jigba had a nice 6 for 69 showing, Tyler Lockett and tight end Noah Fant combined for 4 catches, 31 yards, and 5.1 half PPR points. Tight ends, and particularly Fant, can faceplant at any moment, but we were expecting quite a bit more out of the veteran wide receiver. Not only did he come nowhere close to finishing as a decent wide receiver 3, he finished with fewer receiving yards than Zach Charbonnet, Laviska Shenault, Jake Bobo, and AJ Barner. This was the second time Lockett failed to hit 20 yards in a game, and the 6th game in which he failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. The next couple weeks don't look any easier. In Week 9, the Seahawks will take on the Los Angeles Rams, who allow an average of 38.3 yards per game out of the slot, which is the lowest mark in the NFL. If Metcalf misses that game, Seattle rolls into their bye week and then comes out in Week 11 to face a 49ers defense that just held ancillary Cowboys pass catchers to very minimal output in Week 8. Lockett has long made a name for himself by outkicking his preseason ADP, but it seems that the age 32 season might indeed be the curtain call of fantasy relevancy. While his floor should return after an off week, there's basically no guarantee of any sort of ceiling as the team continues to get JSN more work further away from the line of scrimmage. This makes Lockett a very forgettable fantasy commodity, and not one we should be leaning on as we aim to make our teams more unbeatable the closer we get to the fantasy playoffs. Add Ricky Pearsall. Another game and more injury news to keep track of in San Francisco. Though Deebo Samuel played in Week 8 despite his rib/wrist issues, he would eventually find the sideline again, and though the bye week comes at a good time for him, we can still give another look to the rookie Ricky Pearsall. His second professional game didn't produce incredible fantasy numbers, 9.7 half PPR points on 5 touches and 77 yards, but he did get on the field at a high clip once again. His 69.7% route participation was tied with Deebo for the second highest mark of the week, and he now has the proverbial post-bye rookie bump looming when the team reconvenes in Week 10. This may seem like a bad time to add him, but it's now clear that he's above the bar of a speculative add, with Brandon Ayuk missing the rest of the season. And while Juwan Jennings might be returning to the field, Chris Conley, who led the team in route participation last week, is now labeled week to week with a hamstring strain. It's been never-ending bad luck for this team's skill position players all season long. Because of this, it's nearly impossible to speculate exactly what the wide receiver rotation will look like when they come out of the bye, but we can be pretty certain that their first-round pick is going to continue to see a lot of action. And with Brock Purdy trailing only Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson in yards per attempt, Pearsall should see a ton of catch-and-run opportunities as the season wears on. Hold the wide receiver through the bye and see if this high upside piece can contribute through the stretch run.